the internet.
Google.
Web.
Twitter stream.
To share them.
To engage.
Always being online.
Use of the web.
Twitter stream.
Wikipedia.
Media.
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 There's a massive generational difference in how people see the web, and that's one of the things that I find most interesting and exciting, you know, not only just between classic generational breakdowns, but much more split and atomized fragments of, early 20s to late 20s to mid 20s. It's more about kind of the stage of life you're at as well, I think, and where you are in the education cycle.
I think one of the things that has happened to the first generation of kids to grow up always being online, which by the way are my kids. They have never experienced dial-up or anything like that. They've always had always on. And what I've seen is they have a global awareness that was not present in my generation. They really feel as if this is one world. They also feel as if they are always connected to everyone else. There is a feeling of being connected that I did not have in my generation.
In the past, I think people have just kind of consumed their knowledge, or I guess their perception of the world just through media, which again isn't always unbiased. But when you start seeing everyday life from everyday people on the streets, no matter what country they live in, I think it adds a very personal element to that people can connect with, and they start understanding that they have families, they have feelings, they have dreams, just like I do, and not hearing just the biased stories that they would tune in and see on the news.
Okay, we all have information needs. Those needs might arise from health, it might arise from wanting to find a good school, it might even arise from wanting to find the cheapest product somewhere. Everything triggers off a sort of information need. And to meet your need, you've got to seek information, hence information seeking. Now, in the old days, it wasn't so easy to do that. You could talk to your mother, you could maybe go to the local library, and if you were lucky enough to live next door to the British Library, you were really lucky because they had lots and lots of information and lots of opportunities for information seeking. Now, in today's universe, everybody has the British Library on their doorstep, in their mobile phone, on their laptop, in their office, and suddenly we have unbelievable resources close to hand, and we can seek information in any particular way we like with so many possibilities. In fact, information seeking it's a siren behavior. We're attracted by seeking information, finding things, and all of those things. So today, information seeking is central to everything in our lives. And unless we can information seek well, we're in real trouble.
When you grow up expecting to be able to find information at a moment's notice, what does it do to your ability to internalize information? And the brain is very, very plastic, very malleable, but at a certain point, it does get wired up, and it gets wired up in a particular way. And so I look at my son, who's 8, and he asked me, my wife, when Michael Jackson passed away, my wife muttered something at the breakfast table about him being a criminal. And my son later asked me, right, was that true? And I said, well, the dilemma of explaining the difference between accusation and proof and so forth, we're going along in this conversation, and I say essentially no one knows, right? There were these questions, nothing was ever proved. And he looked at me and said, not even Wikipedia? And I realized he'd never asked a question before, because he tends to be in the domain of facts. What's the fastest train, Dad? I have no idea, but Wikipedia does. What's the tallest building? I'll look it up on Wikipedia. And suddenly he comes up to a question that's entirely interpretive. And clearly his worldview was a little bit shaken, because there'd never been a question he couldn't answer before. And so you wonder how much of his relationship to the factual is being shaped by the idea that you You don't need to guess or estimate or remember. If you can get your hands on a keyboard, you can find out right then.
The more we use the web, the more we train ourselves to skip very, very quickly among many pieces of information, and we lose the ability to stop and concentrate. And so you could say that the outcome of that will have, access and ability to process huge amounts of little snippets of information, but we'll kind of begin to sacrifice the ability to create the associations ourselves among those bits of information that I think lead to true knowledge and ultimately wisdom.
Well, it's clear that even people who have, like me, who started off without the web and now use it, work differently. When we want to think of something, we tend to often just reach for the keyboard because we have assumed that we can find stuff.
Generally, you speak through typing the words, but it's natural language. That's a big shift in interface. And we expect the world, when we speak, to completely reorganize around what we say in 0.2 seconds, because that's what Google does. And so now you're Walmart, and you're supposed to do that. That's a huge business challenge. And Walmart has thousands of people on that business challenge right now. And they have for the last, since Google came out. And they're not alone. Every major company is focused on this. And that's a huge story. It's a story I find compelling. It's a story I started a business in. It's a story that, I think will have legs for a few decades anyway.
Things are free and things are devalued now. I can't get paid to write because there's so much writing out there. But this is a temporary stage. This is not a function of technology, but a function of economics. The crash that we're going through now, this upset in central banking, is largely a result of the ability of people all throughout the periphery to create value without capital. That's a really strange thing. In the old days, if you wanted to create value, you needed to go to the bank, borrow money, set up your factory, and do this thing. Now you can create value without going to the bank, without getting that central capital up front. That's what's created the confusion. That's what's upset the banks. There's no longer a market for their product, which is cash. So what do? Well, there's big wobble until that's figured out. And that's why we have this problem of the free.
And the real question, I think, is how much of that is normal human plasticity, right? We all are really good at responding to opportunities. And this young generation has different opportunities than my generation had. And how much of it is actually that their brains are being wired differently because of exposure to the media environment they're being exposed to. The first category is it's relatively easy to see examples of that. In the States right now, because we're very good at moral panics, people my age, mid-40s and up, are wringing their hands right over what teens are doing on Facebook. As if we would not have done those things had Facebook existed when we were young. And so we want to project this idea, I wasn't putting drunk pictures of myself up on Facebook. It's like, no one gave us the chance. But I remember us. I think we would have done that in a heartbeat if Facebook had been around. And so rather than, sitting around complaining about how young people have it better than us, which makes us look like old fogies, we decide instead that this is a threat to civilization and must be, must be addressed at once in the highest halls of power.
If I look now at how 8, 9, 10-year-olds use the web, it's completely different to how, somebody aged 18 would use it, completely different how I would use it again. And I think that one of the issues around the privacy questions that are now being raised are, have we taught children how to be safe online enough? And are we, aware enough, if we've come at this later with technology, of all the different ways that information is used? So there's definitely a piece of education that needs to underpin all of the developments that are happening in technology.
Well, I think this generation has a sense that information wants to be free and information about themselves wants to be free. And in a way, there's a kind of self-surveillance that I think that young people don't think about in political terms. But it is a political issue. People put their lives on the screen. They put really intimate details of their lives out there, and with very little thought that there might be people using that information in ways that are not benign.
A lot of things that were private just because it wasn't practical to share them. And so it was strange to share them, so it may be strange to say to the world, hey, I'm having lunch at this place, because I would have never done that before, but that doesn't mean I care or that it needs to be private. And so people are understanding that in big numbers, and as Biz says, it's been a process. It's been happening. When blogging started, which we were involved in 10 years ago, it was this crazy notion. First of all, why would you have the audacity to think anyone would care what you read? and secondly, why are not all blogs are private by any means, are personal information, but even like writing these sort of a journal online is like blasphemy. It's like, why would you? And now that's a much more accepted idea that people would share parts of their lives, and I think it'll become just obvious.
And so I think for the teenagers today, they're going to be living out their teenage lives in this very persistent, very searchable manner. But 10, 15 years from now, it's going to be part of a longer trajectory, and the people are going to be looking at the things they're doing as 20-somethings. And sure, we look back and go, oh, that was stupid what I did when I was 14. And it was. It always was. But when you have this cultural element where everybody's got this track record, it's not going to be as shocking as it is right now for the people who are learning that and figuring it out.
So Twitter, which is a good example, when that arrived, the press said, the most banal, ridiculous, fatuous people telling you what they had for breakfast. Oh, I did this. And look at this Twitter stream by this moronic celebrity. How boring is that? 2 weeks later, join our Twitter stream at daily whatever, and suddenly they're desperate to jump on it. Absolutely. And politicians, there are dozens of politicians who think, oh, damn, why did I speak out against Twitter just 2 months ago? I said it was banal and stupid, and now it means I can't have my own Twitter stream, and everyone else has, and I'm losing out. How do I backpedal here? Because no fault of their own, they didn't quite see how it was going to develop.
But as we see what this generation looks like as it grows up with it, they're now a generation in retreat. They'll text, but they won't talk. One of the things that has been so, for somebody like me who does interviews and who believes in what you learn from the face, from, the philosophers tell us that we become human when we're confronted with another face through the voice, through the inflection of the voice. These kids don't want to see a face, they don't want to see a voice. They want to text. So that in a way we're no longer nourished but consumed in some way by what we've created. And I think that's very, it's not all good. It's not all good. I see people in retreat as much as they are in advance now that they have all this information.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty amazing to see how the next generation, I guess, evolves, if you want to call it that. Because of their access to technology, but ultimately their access to information. I think education is being redefined. It's not necessarily about memorization. It's about searching for answers. You have an infinite amount of resources available to you, or information available to you. And I think people, or this next generation, I guess they're much more knowledgeable about any topic that you can think of. That also sometimes people think of I guess the dangers of people trying to trick individuals with deceiving them with information that's not correct, that posting rumors, but again, I think this next generation is potentially more wary, or I guess conscious of that they are making their own decisions. They understand if they're reading a post or about to click on a link, where that's going to take them. So I think everyone's now is kind of conscious of how maybe people are trying to shape their thoughts or feelings. But again, that's not any different than what has happened in the past. I think different news organizations have different takes on, just even one particular event, especially when you talk about the political system. So when you pick up a newspaper or turn on the television, news program at the end of the day, they're trying to represent their point of view, which people would always have to kind of take with a grain of salt, I guess, if you will. But now people are, I guess, more conscious of that happening across the web.